more curious about the history and how this happened. We don't have any records or anything.
Not that I'm aware, Councillor Rhodes.
Are we compromising any other significant jobs by taking us away from the budgeted amount already?
No, it would just delay some of our other design projects until 2022.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded that we go, it says an estimated 30,000. If that is a different amount, you will come back and talk to us?
That is correct, Your Worship.
Okay. Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you very much. That's carried. And next is the Mr. Brownstein, the extension of Waste Connection Canada contract.
Thank you, Your Worship. A one-year contract extension is required in order to have Waste Connections of Canada take on the supply, delivery, and upkeep of recycling carts for the community for the next 5.5 years, with a contract expiry of July 1st, 2026. As the September 21st, 2020 special council meeting, it was decided to move forward with the purchase of recycling carts from Waste Connections of Canada. As part of that approval, it was identified that the town of Osoyoos would need to extend their current contract with Waste Connections Canada by 1 year. That would make the total term of 8 years. The original contract was signed July 1st, 2018, with an extension to the new amendment contract would expire July 1st, 2026. The amendment will not take effect until July 1st, 2020. The amendment outlines the additional contract year, a new line item for payment structure, as well as terminology relating to the requirements of Waste Connection Canada for the supply, delivery, and upkeep of the carts over the term of the contract. It also states that the carts will become the property of the town of Osoyoos upon the end of the term. This contract amendment has been received and reviewed by staff and is found to meet the needs of both the community and the contractor. Staff is recommending that Council authorize the extension of the contract with Waste Connections Canada for 1 year with a new expiry date of July 1st, 2026, and the necessary signatories endorse the contract amendment.
Thank you. I'm wondering why it need to be extended. Is there, I don't quite understand that, why it needs to be extended for 6 years. Is that normal? Is that a normal?
No, it was an extension for 1 year, Your Worship, and it was to cover the capital costs to Waste Connections to supply all the carts.
Okay. Councillor King?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess in this agreement, it says it's an agreement, a term of 8 years.
Yes, that is total contract years. So the original contract was
we've
7
got 2
years with an additional 8, or additional 1 to make it 8 years.
Okay.
Term of 8 years.
Council, what would you like to do about this?
I don't think there is anything we can do.
So is this to, so we just do this is a final, that we're just agreeing to extend this
I have a
to,
question, Madam Mayor.
go ahead. Councillor Harvey?
What would happen if we were to decide not to amend the contract?
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Waste Connections would have the option of no longer supplying us carts. They would have the option of increasing our monthly cart rate. There may be other options out there. So instead of us currently paying $3.65 a month per cart per customer, they may raise their rates in order to do cost recovery in a lower term.
So I know that this issue has come up and it's been a bit of a concern with some of the people in town, which is why I think we're sort of questioning it, because it does seem like a fairly large increase in monthly recycling bill for sure. So what do you think, Council? What are we going to do about this?
I'll move a
Councillor?
motion to be extended by 1 year to 2/26.
Second.
Okay. So the motion is to extend it by 1 year to the new expiry date of July 1st, 2026. All in favor? Against?
Harvey's against.
Councillor Harvey is against. Thank you. Next is my list on here, Mrs. Hilson, is different than my list in the program, so I'm just gonna go through with what's being done. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next is the management compensation for overtime during emergencies. Is that's
Yes.
where we're at? Good. Okay, Mr. Chabot.
Thank you, Your Worship. Emergency events and local government response have grown in frequency and duration over the past several years. Spring freshet and flooding events, wildfire seasons, and other disasters, and now the COVID-19 pandemic have seen local governments establish local emergency operations centers that are often in operation 7 days a week for months at a time. The Town of Osoyoos Emergency Operations Center staff includes all management exempt staff and some QP employees. Emergency operations centers are established at varying levels depending upon the needs and severity of an event, and staffing levels are scaled up or down as required. During prolonged emergency operations, consideration needs to be given to management compensation for overtime. For unionized employees, the collective agreement between the town and QP Local 608 establishes the overtime compensation framework for those employees when they work overtime, either during an emergency or when other needs dictate. The attached policy suggests a framework for management exempt staff compensation for overtime during emergency events. The policy mirrors the overtime framework provided to unionized staff when reimbursement for overtime is provided from Emergency Management BC. When overtime reimbursement is not provided, generally during smaller scale or shorter duration events, the policy suggests that management exempt employees would be compensated for overtime at straight time. And that would only apply to those management exempt employees who don't have a employment contract that covers it off. There are some who will get overtime in accordance with the Employment Standards Act because they don't perform the functions of a manager. They don't meet the definitional thing of a manager. And so there's a couple employees that applies to. For the rest of the management exempt, almost all of them, their employment contract already states that for overtime work, they're paid at straight time. And the intention there is that that type of overtime is supposed to be intermittent, supposed to be limited. People are expected to get their jobs done during their regular hours. But that is the case for most of the managers here. So nothing really changes except and until we get reimbursement from Emergency Management BC for those costs that are beyond a regular working day or when a manager is asked to work on their day of rest. Exactly the same as provided to our QP employees, with the exception that managers from time to time will work overtime at straight time.
Councillor
I have
King?
a question. What's our definition of an emergency event?
I think we'd use it when an emergency operations center has been activated at whatever level, when there's been one actually convened because there's a need to exist for that coordinating, supportive body within our organization.
So is that like the government enacts it first?
Nope, we have the authority to declare a local state of emergency and assume extraordinary powers. Most often, that power is not used, but emergency operations centers are activated. If we get into extended wildfire season, that would be one. I think the flooding events of 2 years ago, probably there was a large-scale EOC established at Penticton for the RDOS. I don't know if there was states of local emergency declared. Did we do one here?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
There-
Osoyoos?
and-
Okay.
I understand the fires and flooding, but I guess it was like, does it have to be so many acres of fire before it be called an emergency, or my house is burning down, it's an emergency?
It's discretionary. You know, there was a time when I worked in Prince George and the Fraser River was at peak height and volume and speed. And we declared a state of local emergency incorrectly, got everyone all in a panic. We had localized flooding is what we had. And we needed it operationalized to deal with that. That wasn't an emergency, but it's gonna vary from time to time. Onstein as the emergency program coordinator
Okay.
and myself as his deputy, and the emergency program bylaw authorizes either the coordinator, the CAO, the fire chief, or the mayor, I believe, to cause the emergency plan to be enacted. The state of a local emergency declaration is either a power of the mayor or the council. Nobody on staff can do that.
Okay, no, I appreciate that feedback, thank you.
Yeah.
So, Councillor Rhodes.
Thank you, Member Kordoff. I'd like to speak to the policy itself, and this is a new policy. We don't have anything like it that I've been able to.
Yeah, I was not aware of one, and I
Yeah.
thought, given that we've been operating an emergency operations center for a month already,
Okay.
that it was probably important to have some guidance from council as to what was acceptable.
So my question is, speculating that this policy is introduced into our policy manual, so to speak, when does it take place? Like, when does it become effective? And is the benefits that derive from this policy, are they retroactive in any way? And if they're retroactive, I would be interested to know the dollar value of that retroactive motion.
Your worship, my instructions to staff was that during this level of activation in this current event, there was little to no need for overtime. We have incurred some overtime costs, and I've approved people's timesheets getting approved at the rates recommended in this policy. I'm one-off unique in my employment agreement. It doesn't provide for any provision for overtime reimbursement. I don't expect this policy would not be made retroactive, but it won't change the basis on which people have been remunerated for overtime already. Noting that emergency management has approved us for the payment of overtime right now during this provincial state of emergency. So if there is any, we're getting reimbursed for it.
Go
And
ahead.
the other thing is, the last item on the policy, because there was no guidance, is it says wherever possible, management staff shall obtain approval from the town's Emergency Operations Center Director for emergency management recovery and response overtime in advance. So don't decide to spend your whole weekend being creative, thinking things up for us to do, and then expect us to pay the bill, because we won't.
And I'd also like to point out that at bottom of the suggested policy, it says that it's in camera, and that is
I
been
copied
taken
and
off.
pasted from a previous one, and so I guess that was how they like to do finance
will.
policies. I saw no reason why this conversation would be behind closed doors.
Okay. And I am certainly concerned about in this day and age of having a lot of overtime as well, because it's an expensive endeavor, and even though we might get it from Emergency Management BC, in the end, you know, it's the taxpayers everywhere that pay for these things. So we need to be very careful about encouraging people to do overtime, and so I appreciate the fact that that you have suggested that it should not, under these circumstances anyway, we should not have a great deal of overtime, and it should be asked for in advance wherever possible. I think that we need to be fiscally responsible here, and our directors obviously need to be as well. Councillor King?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess with this policy, I look at number 4. If overtime is not authorized, but they can still get paid regular time. So,
That's already in their employment contracts.
Okay,
And so I'm not really changing anything, I'm just putting it all in one spot to make it plain. And as I mentioned, typically when we're not gonna get reimbursed, it's gonna be a shorter activation or a less serious type of emergency event. So they're already entitled to that. Your worship, it's important to compensate people appropriately during emergencies, because overtime, it can't be made mandatory.
I agree.
We're reliant on the goodwill of our employees to be there for their community, and so I think this
Put in the
does
extra.
that.
Okay, fair enough, thank you. So do we have a motion? We don't. Is there someone who would like to make a motion about one of the options here that's provided?
I'll move number 1, council approves the management compensation for overtime during emergencies policy.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that?
I'll
Councillor,
second it.
thank you. Is that Councillor Harvey?
No, Councillor Myers.
Okay, sorry.
The screen disappeared, so.
Yes, the screen, I can't see your mouth
need to move
moving,
the
so
chair.
I think that,
No, he's frozen.
you're frozen, so thank you for saying that. Councillor Bennett seconding that. Anyone else like to comment on this? Okay, well, we will take the vote. All in favor?
In favor.
Thank you. Yes, he needs to say that now. Okay, next is the Osoyoos Childcare Center application form. Mr. Chabot?
Yeah, Your Worship, thank you. This will be a familiar item for council. As council will recall, the Osoyoos Childcare Center got funding support from the Community Childcare Space Creation Program in 2019, the amount of $892,500. That funding would enable them to renovate and add to the, in February of this year, the Child Care Center with the town submitted an additional funding application to the BC New Spaces Fund in the amount of $3 million, seeking to seriously grow the capacity to provide childcare in Osoyoos, deal with the wait list that they had. That funding application had errors in it where it was non-compliant with the childcare regulation and therefore was rejected. Because the province had such a high degree of interest in the program, originally it was without funding application deadline. It was just on a rolling basis. Because the program was so successful in attracting applicants, they've now put program application deadlines in. And so this is a revised application. It reduces down the cost of the ask from $3 million to $1.68 million, cuts it almost in half, brings the cost per child care space proposed to be created in line with the provincial guidelines and goals and objectives. This, if approved, would see a capital build of $2.57 million addition to the existing child care space, a significant improvement to child care, both quality and quantity for Osoyoos. The report does note that we still need to resolve issues surrounding the use of a little bit of school district land for an expanded child care facility, and that'll be pursued, I guess, probably more completely when the success of this application or not is known. And so child care folks have pulled this together for us again and asked the town to submit it as the landowner and take on the role of project manager. So like the other application, ask the same things of council, and that is that they approve the childcare expansion plans included in the Childcare BC New Spaces Fund application and agrees to provide overall grant management for any approved funding, and that town council agrees to support and provide any necessary additional project funding if total project costs exceed the provincial funding amount. Other options are that council does not approve the submission of the grant application, or the council requires additional information or amendments to be made before it is submitted.
Thank you. Councillor King?
Yeah, I got no problem with option one, but I like to discuss number two. And maybe I'll just talk about number two before we talk about number one. The way it reads right now, if they weren't getting the second grant, we'd be obligated to pay 1.6 million thereabouts, the way I read it. I know it kind of implies you're hoping to get both grants, then it'll come within budget. But the way this reads, I believe, we would be on the hook if they don't get the second grant and they only keep that first one. The way this says we're responsible.
No,
That we agreed to necessary additional project funding.
that's for the $2.57 million project. If they don't get the grant, all they've got to spend on childcare expansion is $892,500. And it's just a condition of the grant application that a local government submitting assures that it will make up any shortfall if project cost surpasses the maximum provincial funding amount, and that's the amount applied for. They don't want a bunch of half-built things because somebody poorly managed it. And as I noted in my report, that implies a need for our greater involvement in the project management and its procurement to make sure that it does come in on budget.
Yeah, I understand, but I guess maybe my brain is working sideways. It just says the town agrees to support and provide any necessary additional project funding if the total project costs exceed the provincial funding amount.
And that
So
would
if they
be
don't
the-
get the second funding, the whole amount to build it, they would only have the 800 and something thousand.
Yes.
And we would be on the hook for the rest.
No, because the plan wouldn't be to build a $2.5 million project or 2.6 with only 892.
So
I
it would be
realize
up to
it
the
would,
project.
but
This
it-
resolution is in relation to the Childcare BC New Spaces Fund application.
I-
The earlier approval was under the Community Childcare Space Creation Program, a different fund.
I realize you're adding a lot of conversation, but I'm just reading this one sentence. There is different paperwork to go with what your conversation says, and I'm not trying to be difficult here. It's just, the way I read this, the town would be responsible for any cost rides over budget.
Maybe we could just
That's all I'm
adjust
saying.
that so that it says,
The two funding or something.
that for the total budget, if the total budget somehow was accepted, but otherwise it would go back. I'm not quite sure how we do that.
Council's got to put these items in their financial plan. And it'll only get in the financial plan if you get the
Right.
grant. If we
Okay.
get too wordy and creative, then the funders are gonna look at that and say, well, I don't know what these guys are doing. I don't really know how I can provide an assurance to council other than we're not gonna build things we don't have funding for.
No, I think we need to get the grant
Well,
first and
well,
then, yeah.
okay, I just add a little more.
Yeah,
But if I was to read this and this gets passed, and I'm a public person reading it, it says the town's gonna pay for any excess amount for the, over above the provincial funding. And I
the
hear it over
provincial
here,
funding being applied for is the Childcare BC New Spaces Fund application.
well, maybe that could be in there, but it's not in that one sentence in number
We
two.
could add words to that effect.
That's all
Okay.
I'd like is a few
Yeah,
more
we
words,
could add a
that's
few
simple,
words in there.
yeah, that's all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so more of the first one.
Sure,
I have one concern on here on, under 4, proposed childcare facility spaces and hours of operation. It's on page 1-2, the bottom of the second page. And it says, will the facility regularly offer extended daily hours before 6 a.m. and after 7 p.m.? And they've checked yes. And yet on the next page at the top, it has hours, and the earliest they would open is 7:50 and it closes at 5:30. So to me, that's not consistent. And I'm just wondering if we could check with them about that, because if they say that they regularly have it open longer than that, it doesn't show in that table,
right,
okay?
okay.
And the other thing is on the local community involvement on page 4. There's just a couple, just those little paragraph there, 5.2. There's a couple of spelling errors and so on, and I'm just thinking that perhaps we could fix those up before we send them off, because it's your signature on the bottom. Is that correct?
It's my email gonna send it to them. I don't think I sign it.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. It just said that I saw somewhere that you needed to sign it. So I just wanted to make sure that that was checked before it was signed. Now, Councillor Rhodes, you had something?
I think Councillor Harvey
Oh,
was
sorry,
next.
Councillor Harvey, you were next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I was just wanted to comment on the previous discussion. I see absolutely no ambiguity in recommendation 2. This is tied to anything other than the new grant application for 1.68. And it's only for that application. And so I don't see any need for amendment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So it was just in the wording there. Okay, Councillor Rhodes.
Thank you, Mayor McCordoff. Question about the amount, the 1.68 is based on what criteria? Have we done any design or?
There
Is it
is rough square footage, and then there's landform architecture out of Penticton has provided a cost estimation for the elements to be constructed. Interesting, they grant a little bit more leniency to a local government applicant for cost estimation. They allow it to be a little bit more general a little more high level, then if another group were to apply, they would want you to have 2 firm bids for each item costed.
Okay.
So there's other elements, there's a schematic design of the building that will show how many spaces and how many children will be in each space, and then there's just, it's just a one-page summary, and it says, you know, here's gonna be your civil, here's gonna be your engineering, here's gonna be your construction, those items, and it all totals up to that amount.
One more question, if I could. Most of us on council and our mayor are aware of the challenges with regard to the school district property. I'm wondering, and I know it's insensitive, and I don't mean to sound insensitive, I'm wondering, what do we do if that stands in the way of this entire project? What if we're not able to resolve that matter?
The school district has indicated support for the previous application. They've indicated support for coming to some arrangement with the town and the society for a use of a portion of their property, the details of which are yet to be negotiated. So what we haven't done yet is settle on a means of disposal of an interest in the property, whether it be by lease, and if so, for what term and at what rate, or by subdivision and sale and consolidation. I know I have preferred outcomes that I would like to see, but no, we haven't come to a firm agreement yet.
And that will not compromise the application at all?
No,
With that
we've got
uncertainty,
a
or-
letter from them that says they're supportive of the
Oh, okay.
project, and
Right.
that was obtained for the previous
Yeah.
application. The Childcare Society gave me the same items again to include with a renewed application.
Okay.
Okay,
But yeah,
Okay.
that is, it's good to know that that's still outstanding.
Okay.
yeah. And it has been a bit of a confusing issue for
Yeah.
sure. Okay, is there any, do we have a motion? No, we don't. All right, is there somebody who would like to make a motion then, please, based on the report? Councillor Rhodes.
Thank you, Mayor McCardoff. I'll make, first, do you want them separately, or? Yes, please. Okay.
Okay,
I'll make a motion based on the staff recommended option number 1.
thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Harvey seconding that. All in favor?
In favor.
Thank you. Against?
No.
Are you in favor?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So that's carried. Now, is there someone who'd like to make a motion based on number 2? Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, I'll move staff recommended option number 2.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Rhodes. Are all in favor?
In favor.
Thank you. Against? No, we're okay with that. Thank you very much. So we will have a look at the, Mr. Chabot, at some of the,
Yep, those
Okay.
hours of
I've-
operation and some of the,
I've got a
I
couple of.
wasn't gonna rewrite their
I know.
text in their application for them.
My only concern was you have to sign it, so.
Yeah,
that's- I'll show you
I've
what
signed
I've
worse before
highlighted
you wrote.
And she
after.
was a school teacher.
You're gonna get this all year.
Yeah. You're gonna get a C minus.
It'd be a good,
No,
be a
no,
good
no.
idea to start going to the library regularly, too.
When it opens.
Yeah.
All right. Next is, we do not have a notice of motion. So we're going to look at the report, the general net payroll and Sun Bowl Arena financial accounts. And up to April the 20th, 2020, we have general cash requirements of $242,470.17 and Sun Bowl cash requirements of $537.71, and those would be adopted by consensus. And net payroll accounts of $85,733.30, and that would be for information. So we will go back to the CAO report, please, Mr. Chabot.
Your worship, actually did prepare one, a bit of a summary for everybody that I will give to Ms. Hilson. She can include with the minutes of the meeting. I do have to say that this COVID-19 pandemic and our consideration of the ability to continue to provide essential services to help safeguard our community, to support orders of the provincial health officer to reopen washrooms for travelers and persons at risk of homelessness. Having bylaw continue out to 7 days a week now to help ensure businesses that are ordered to be closed are closed, to ensure businesses that are open are practicing physical distancing, to go and talk to people who might be camping at various and sundry unorganized areas of the community are provided with information, dealing with our staff scheduling, closing town hall, public works, operations to the public, closing the Sonora Center, shutting down the arena. Just been an incredibly busy time. The cleaning protocols in our facilities that remain open for workers have changed to twice daily now for disinfection, high-touch surfaces being contacted. We dealt with some employee layoffs as a direct result of COVID-19 closing facilities and creating a shortage of work, and so a number of staff have been given notice of a temporary layoff. Now, guess the impacts of this thing continue to become known, and as council knows, you've been just inundated with information and federal, provincial announcements, public health officer announcements, both federally and provincially. Been really quite something, and really taken us off our game. And so, as council knows, we're adjusting our operating and capital expenditures, try to reduce the burden on people, change tax due dates, etc. So that's been really the majority of focus for the senior management and for the staff in our organization for the better part of the last month. We are continuing to operate and maintain most things, unlike a number of other communities who have really stepped back from things and done large-scale layoffs and then find that they're having to put people back to work, that those maybe weren't the best decisions. So we've worked really hard to try to make sure that we're capable of responding and that our employees stay well. And certainly the council not coming into the meeting, practicing social distancing, a number putting in on the phone and on this system that apparently doesn't work quite as well as we hoped yet. We're working with it. Staff, we're trying to get that all sorted out. Communication with the community, the number of emails, the number of phone calls, the number of requests has been really quite remarkable, and I think the staff overall have done a really good job of trying to cover off, be adaptable, listen to people's concerns, take steps to address them where it's appropriate. And so this has more of just the usual stuff of what staff have been doing. Also, a number of the senior staff completed on their own time a Justice Institute of BC's course about just what an emergency operations center is and what roles we all play in them. And so I think we probably had 6 people sign up and take that course, so really good on them. Really nice to up our game and get better at doing these things, because as I noted earlier, local government's expected role in emergencies continues to grow, and certainly with things like climate change becomes more important as well. So I'll put this in with the minutes, and you can read it all at your leisure if you're running out of emails about COVID-19 and bulletins. But thanks very much for council's patience and support during what's been a trying time for everyone, I think. And so it's just important to look out for one another, look out for yourself.
And thank you, Mr. Chabot. You've done an amazing job of leading the troops here and making sure that we are all well looked after and that all of the details, I know that all of you, especially you've been putting in a lot of extra hours, and sometimes you don't get weekends off either, so I understand that.
Thank you. I
So-
did want to make one mention again of the good information available on our website.
Yes,
Communications staff,
absolutely.
Ms. Core and Hilson have done an amazing job of putting together
Yes.
good information for anyone interested in knowing more or knowing who to call and what they can find out about.
Perfect.
But yeah, thank you, my pleasure.
Thank you very much, and we need a motion to accept the CAO report, please. Councillor Rhodes, Councillor King. All in favor? Thank you. Councillor Bennett's in favor. Good. All right, so we will Are we down to Councillor Harvey? Did you have a report today?
No, I don't really have a report. I just wanted to say that how pleased I am to see the golf course open with new protocols that I think are going to ensure safety. And I think it's good for people to get out of being cooped up and participate in outdoor activities such as this. So that's all.
Good, thank you. And it's certainly one of the first things that can be opened up because there's definitely physical distancing that can be practiced out there. So enjoy the golf course now that the weather is getting better. Councillor Rhodes.
Thank you, Madam Cordoff. I'm going to use one simple word in the English language, ditto everything our CAO Chabot said. Couldn't have said it more eloquently, and if I was to repeat it all, I'd probably mess it all up. So thank you for those comments, and every bit of it's true, and everything is good in that area, and carry on, and we'll get through this in one way or another. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor King.
Thank you, Mayor and Mayor. I'll pass it this time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to mention one thing, that I also agree with the CEO and the great job the town's doing. I was going to keep on cleaning washrooms, doing stuff to the trucks, and working really hard through Jared, so they're doing a great job, and the town hall staff. And just wanted to end and say that I just got an email from the People for Bikes Coalition, and they just said that bike membership, ridership boomed in cities, record public transportation, bikes are uniting and encouraging people to stay apart, and since they don't have the public transit, people are finding other ways, so it's a good, healthy option.
Good, thank you very much. So it's been kind of a busy time for me. I've been on several phone calls with the ministry concerning issues in the town and in each of our municipalities. I've also been on some conference calls with Zoom calls with the regional district and with various other people that seem to need some information about the town. So I just want to say that we have a very well-run EOC, Emergency Operations Center here. All of that information and the updates are provided on our osoyoos.ca website. And if you click on the top right, it says COVID-19. It's sort of on the right-hand side. You will see all of the information, that the updates from the province, from the EOC things, and so it's an ongoing thing. It changes sometimes daily, and as you can see from our meeting today, we've had to adjust a few things that we thought were going to work, and we're now having to look at them. So change is inevitable, but what we need to do is make sure that we are practicing the best way that we can, because when you look after yourself and you pay attention to keeping your hands washed well, and social distancing, and eating well, and getting enough sleep, and those are very, very important. When you look after yourself, you also look after everyone else. So as we start to see a few things perhaps opening up a little bit over the next month, 2 months. Definitely the golf course is that's something that can be done now, as long as people are very careful to make sure that they're social distancing, and we want people to get outside and get some fresh air. I've saw some people out on the lake recently on a paddle board, one person to a paddle board, so there were social distancing. I've seen some people out on boats fishing. So there are things that you can do and that would be good for your physical health and your mental health. So make sure that you look after yourself, because then you're looking after everyone else. I know that on the long weekend, we didn't have nearly as many tourists here in town, and we did have some people that were here with their second homes, so we know that as well. But you know, we need to make sure that we're thinking clearly about how we can protect ourselves. And so, you know, we will adjust those over time. As things improve, we can maybe relax some of those rules a little bit. But I certainly listen to Dr. Henry on a daily basis. I also listen to our provincial government and our federal government, and I think really that everybody working together is doing a wonderful job. So I think we're very lucky to live in this country where we can feel confident that people are doing absolutely the best that they can. I am on the radio on Thursday mornings at 8:15 with Brock, and I try to give some updates on some of the things, and I assume I will continue to do that for a little while. So please know that we're trying to keep you updated. We're trying to deal with things as they happen. I certainly appreciate the phone calls and the emails that people have. If you are concerned, please give us a call and we'll try to get the best answer that we can for you. So thank you all for paying attention today to our council meeting. And you know, one of the favorite things that I've seen, which I write down, two things. Chief Louis said about 2 weeks ago, when asked about COVID, he said, "We're all in the same canoe." And I thought that was a dandy. I love that one. The other thing, Dr. Henry always says in her broadcasts, when she makes us feel so, she just has such a nice, kind, warm way of making us feel like people are listening and they're helping us. And so she says, be calm, be kind. In other words, be kind to each other, even if you may not agree exactly with what they're doing, and be safe. So thank you, everyone, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Councillor King, Councillor Bennett, all in favor.